Cannon again with the Metaphysical Hour. And before we start, I want to give out the 800 number just in case anyone does want to call in. The number is 1-888-268-4313. 888-268-4313. Okay, one thing, I'm very glad to be back in the United States. Last week, I broadcast from the UFO Conference in Eureka Springs, and I said then that the next time we had a show, I was going to talk about my trip, because I was gone 5 weeks, and I went to just all the way around the world and back. So I wanted to talk some about that before I get into some other things anyway. I've been getting emails from people, and they say they enjoy that when I talk about my trips and talk about the things I've been doing. So I hope so, anyway, because I'm out of the country so much now. But I left the end of February and was gone the entire month of March and just got back the first week in April. And during that time, I know blogging service was, BBS Radio was doing their moving to California, so a lot of these shows were reruns while they got all of that set up. So now we're going to be back to live again. But when I left, I first went to Amsterdam. I had to do a class there, and I had some lectures. And one thing with this trip, I don't think my body knew where I was after a while, because I was all over the place, traveling in so many different climates. And when you could do that, it's hard to figure out what to take with you, what to pack to take with you. I first went to Amsterdam and had a class there because I am teaching my hypnosis method now all over the world. And it is being done outside of the country as well as classes inside the country. And normally when I travel, one of my daughters goes with me because as a lot of you probably know, my daughters work for me. This time I didn't have anyone of the family to go with me. And I had to have someone because there's so much business that is transacted while I'm traveling also, so I need someone who can do that. So I asked a friend of mine if she wanted to go. I said, would you like to go to India, Russia, Holland, be gone for a month? And she was so excited she almost fell off the chair. So she said she definitely wanted to go with me. And she had quite an experience because she had never been out of the United States before. And so it was quite an experience. But first we went to Amsterdam, and there we had some problems with the visa that I need to get into Russia. Last year when I went over in May, we also had problems with the Russian visa. It seems to be that's the hardest one to get. They only let you have it for just the amount of time that you're going to be in that country. You can't get it for more than a month, and you can't get it more than a month in advance. So it was pretty hard to get it before we left the States. And last year when I went over, I had to go to the Ukraine, and that was easy enough to get that visa. We went to several other countries. And when I got into London, I thought, well, I'll be able to get my visa there at the Russian embassy. Turned out you couldn't. They have a waiting list of almost a month just to get into the embassy to sign up for the visas. So I said, oh boy, now what am I going to do? I had to go from London to Oslo in Norway on that trip, and I thought, well, I can get the visa in Norway. And I get to Oslo, it happened to be a Russian holiday, so the embassy there was closed. So I was beginning to wonder if I was even going to be able to get into Russia, because that was my first trip to do it. My Russian publisher, his main office is in Kiev, in Ukraine. And we had to go there next after Oslo. So they said, don't worry about it. We'll be able to get the Russian visa when we get to Kiev. And that was the last chance. But I've got a really good publisher. He is translating many of my books into Russian, but I've got a really good one. And he said, don't worry about it. If you're not able to get the visa, you can just stay in Kiev and we'll take care of all the expenses. So, okay, but I had the feeling I was supposed to go to Moscow. So it ended up we were able to get the visa on that trip at the very last minute in Kiev. So I don't like to push it that close because something can always happen. So this time it was going to be the same kind of a rigmarole because by the time I left the States, I knew it was going to be impossible to get the visa in time to make the trip because if you get it too far in advance, it's not any good because it's only good for a month. So we were in Amsterdam, and I thought, well, okay, I'll get it here before we go on because we had several other stops, and it'd be all right to do there. Well, first I was staying in The Hague, which is south of Amsterdam. Now, The Hague, many of you may know, is the headquarters for the international courts. It's famous for that. It's very much like the UN because they handle cases from all over Europe and all over the world, I believe. I didn't get as much information about it as I would have liked. But I was staying in The Hague, and they said, don't worry, they have an embassy there, or it's more or less like a consulate. You can get your visa for Russia there. So we go over there, and when we left Arkansas, it was in the 70s going on 80, very rare, very warm for February. We get into Amsterdam and The Hague and Holland, it was cold, snowing, and much different. So we go down to The Hague to get my visa. They took one look at my passport. They said it was too full. I had one page left at the back. I thought they could put a visa on, and they said no, that page couldn't be used. Now, I've already gone through 2 passports up before this one, and they're supposed to be good for 10 years, but I traveled so much that we just filled them up. This one I'd only had 5 years, and it was already full. They said you're going to have some more pages added, which you could do, but they couldn't do it. So they said you're going to have to go to the American Embassy, and turned out the only way I could get this done was in Amsterdam. So we had to take the train to Amsterdam to the American Embassy there to get my extra pages added. But this was beginning to get to the ridiculous stage that every time I try to get into Russia, we have all of these problems. So we spent the whole day in Amsterdam getting the extra pages and then getting the visa that I needed to get into Moscow. Then I had to start my classes and my lectures in The Hague. So after spending a week there doing all of that, my class usually goes for 3 days. And in that time, I teach the technique that I have developed that I use in my hypnosis, because it is a unique technique that I've developed myself. And this is what I teach when I do my classes in the States and in these other countries. So I did that there for a week. Then I had to go on to New Delhi in India. I had to speak for the International Hypnosis Conference that was being held in New Delhi. So we go from snow, where the wind is blowing around the buildings off of the North Sea, it's very cold, and we're all bundled up, and we get to New Delhi. It wasn't quite as hot as it would be other times of the year, but it was still up in the 80s. So you would think that'd be a shock to your system to go from so many different climates. But we got to New Delhi, and we were put up at a really nice hotel where they had the conference. And this went on for almost a week. It's called the World Congress, World Hypnosis Congress. And people came from all over the world for this conference. And it is for those who are professionals in the hypnosis. There were a lot of doctors and professionals there. And they're mostly learning about past life regression and past life therapy. So I do know that this technique of past life therapy is spreading everywhere. When I began this 30, 40 years ago, nobody took past life regression seriously. It was always thought of as just something for New Age kooks, and they would laugh at you. But now I can see the advances we have made in this, and it is turning into a serious science that they are taking seriously now. They say it doesn't matter if the doctors, psychiatrists believe in it. They are seeing that it is a benefit, and it's working. So that's the main thing. They can go ahead and use it. So that's what's happening now. There's more and more of these past life regression conferences popping up everywhere. So that's what this one was for. It was not regular hypnosis. It was focused for the past life regressions. So I spoke there. Mostly they wanted me to talk about my work with UFO cases that I've done for 20 years, because they said nobody else had had that much experience with UFO cases. So that was what they wanted me to focus my talk on. But while we were in New Delhi, part of the conference was to take busloads of us up to see the Taj Mahal. That's something I always wanted to see. So when I'm doing these trips, I do try to work in some play time anyway, where I can get to see things, especially if it's something that I've never seen before. Otherwise, every airport looks the same, every hotel looks the same, every conference center is the same, and you're usually stuck inside. You don't really get to see the country or anything about the place you're at unless you have someone to take you somewhere, or unless the conference has these special trips arranged. And to me, that's wonderful to get to do these things. Part of the reason I agreed to go was I did want to see the Taj Mahal. The only thing about India that I found was depressing and disappointing was the extreme poverty. I guess I wasn't prepared for that, and my friend definitely wasn't, because she had never been out of the United States, and it really hit her hard to see such a contrast in the way people live. I, lived in the Philippines back in the 1960s for 2 years while my husband was in the service, and I have 2 children that were born over there. And there was poverty there, people living in the grass huts on the stilts, but it wasn't that bad. We got used to it. But this was more than I've ever seen anywhere. Even in Peru and those countries in South America, I've never seen poverty as bad as it was in India. And I've heard about it, but I guess until you actually go there and see it, it's something you're not really prepared for. The people living on the streets with nowhere to go. That's what my friend was saying, that the homeless in New York are wealthy compared to these people. There's just no contrast between the homeless that you see in the United States and these poor people, because they have to live on the streets any way they can find a place.